Rain hammered the windows of the penthouse overlooking the Mississippi River, each drop a percussion note in the symphony of a New Orleans storm. Dominic Salvatore stood before the glass, watching lightning fracture the sky over a city that had been his kingdom for 25 years. At 52, his reflection showed a man who had earned every silver thread in his dark hair, every line carved around eyes that had witnessed too much and forgot nothing. The city below pulsed with life. Jazz drifted up from Bourbon Street, tourists stumbled between bars, and beneath it all, the machinery of organized crime turned with the precision of a Swiss watch. Dominic had built that machine, gear by gear, decision by decision, compromise by compromise. He told himself it had rules. No drugs poisoning the neighborhoods where children played. No violence against those who could not fight back. No trafficking in human misery, beyond what the gambling tables and loan books already provided. Old code, his father had called it. A man could break the law without breaking his soul, and Gilo Salvatore had said, if he chose his sins carefully. Dominic no longer believed that, but he had made his choices decades ago, and a man past 50 did not get to unmake the architecture of his life. His phone buzzed against the mahogany bar. Not a call, a notification. Email from an address he did not recognize, subject line blank. His instinct, honed through a quarter-century of navigating betrayal and bloodshed, told him not to open it. He opened it anyway. No text, just an attachment, a video file. The video began with darkness, then the image resolved. A parking garage, concrete pillars casting long shadows under fluorescent lights. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. 2 nights ago. The location tag showed Boston, Massachusetts. A woman walked into frame. Late 20s, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing hospital scrubs beneath a wool coat. She moved with purpose, keys already in hand, heading toward a silver sedan. She looked tired. The kind of tired that came from saving lives for 12 hours straight. Dominic's breath stopped. Isabella. His daughter, the child he had not seen in person for 8 years. The woman who had chosen a different path, a cleaner path, a path that led away from him and everything he represented. The camera followed her across the garage, steady, professional. Then a red dot appeared on the image, small at first, dancing across the concrete. Then it settled on her back, right between her shoulder blades, a laser sight. The dot climbed slowly up her spine, paused at the base of her skull, then moved to her temple. Targeting, acquisition, the casual precision of a professional marksman confirming range and wind. Then the video froze. The frame held on Isabella, unaware, vulnerable, a red dot marking her for death. Text appeared across the bottom of the screen, white letters on black. 72 hours, the ledger for her life. The video ended. The email contained nothing else. No instructions, no contact information, no threats beyond what the imagery had already made horrifyingly clear. Dominic stood motionless, phone in hand, staring at the blank screen. The storm outside intensified, wind driving rain against the glass like thrown gravel. He watched his hand. It did not shake. 25 years in the underworld had trained the tremor out of his body, had taught him that panic was permission for enemies to act. But inside, beneath the enforced calm, something cracked. He had not spoken to Isabella in 8 years. Not since the fight that ended with her screaming at him in this very penthouse, tears streaming down her face, voice raw with a grief that had been aging since her mother died. "You choose this," she had said. "Every day you choose blood money over being a real father, over being a man Mom could have been proud of." She had been 20 then, home from her second year of medical school for Christmas. It was the last time. She never came back to New Orleans after that. Finished her degree in Boston, did her residency there, built a life in a city 2,000 miles from the shadow of his name. He had told himself it was better that way. That distance kept her clean. That if she hated him enough to stay away, she would be safe from the consequences of being Dominic Salvatore's daughter. He had been wrong. Dominic moved to the bar, poured 3 fingers of bourbon into a crystal glass, did not drink it. The ritual was about control, not consumption. He needed to think clearly, and clarity required the illusion of normalcy. The ledger. He had not heard that term spoken aloud in 15 years. Not since his father died, and passed it to him with a warning that felt more like a curse. "This is our insurance," Angelo had said from his deathbed, liver failing, skin yellow, voice a rasp. "Every payment we made, every official we bought, every deal we struck with the other families, all of it documented, all of it locked in here." He had tapped the encrypted USB drive with one skeletal finger. "As long as we have this, they cannot move against us without destroying themselves." Mutually assured destruction, Dominic. The only peace crime families ever know. Dominic had taken the drive, had hidden it in a place no one knew, had told every underboss and captain in the organization that it no longer existed, that he had destroyed it as a gesture of good faith, a way to move the Salvatore family into a new era of cooperation with the other families. It had been a lie, but it was a lie that had kept the peace for 15 years, a lie that had prevented 3 wars and countless bodies from floating in the bayou. And now someone knew. Someone who wanted the ledger badly enough to aim a rifle at a cardiac surgeon who had spent 8 years trying to forget she was born into this world. He pulled up his contacts, scrolled to a name he called perhaps twice a year. Vincent Russo answered on the second ring. "Boss." One word, no inflection. Vincent had been his underboss for 12 years, had come up through the ranks the same way Dominic had, through violence and loyalty and a willingness to make choices that kept him awake some nights. He was 48, looked 60, moved like a man half his age when necessary. "I need you at the penthouse. Now, come alone, tell no one." 10 minutes. The line went dead. Vincent did not ask questions when the request came in that tone. He had heard it perhaps 5 times in 12 years, and each time it had meant the kind of crisis that could unravel everything. Dominic walked to his study, unlocked a floor safe hidden beneath a section of hardwood that looked identical to every other plank. Inside, past cash and documents, and a pistol he had not fired in 7 years, sat a fireproof lockbox the size of a hardcover book. He opened it. The USB drive sat inside, small and black and unremarkable. It looked like something a teenager might use to store homework. It contained the power to destroy governors and judges, FBI agents and crime bosses, businessmen and police chiefs. 25 years of carefully documented corruption. His father had been meticulous. Every payment recorded with date, amount, recipient, and purpose. Every favor logged. Every threat cataloged. Angelo Salvatore had run his organization like a corporation, and this was the audit trail. Dominic had added to it over the years. Not much. His operation was smaller than his father's had been, more focused. But there were entries, names, faces, people who owed and people who were owed. He closed the box without removing the drive. Not yet. First, he needed to understand who was making the demand and why they believed they could threaten Isabella without consequence. Vincent arrived in 8 minutes, his face rain-slicked, his coat dark with water. He stepped into the penthouse and read Dominic's expression before any words were exchanged. "How bad?" Dominic handed him the phone, the video already cued. Vincent watched in silence, his face carved from stone. When it finished, he looked up. "When did this come?" 20 minutes ago. "You told me she was in Boston, working at a hospital." She is. Massachusetts General, cardiac surgery. Vincent nodded slowly. She doesn't know about this. It was not a question. Vincent knew Isabella had cut contact 8 years ago, knew Dominic received updates about her from sources she would never suspect, knew the man he served still called her every birthday and Christmas, even though she never answered. She doesn't know about any of this. The email, the threat, the ledger. You told everyone you destroyed it. I lied. Vincent processed this without visible reaction. Who else knows you lied? You, now no one else. Then how did they find out? That was the question that would determine whether this was salvageable or catastrophic. Dominic walked to the window, watched lightning illuminate the river. Either someone in the organization suspected and confirmed it, or someone outside the families has been digging through old connections and pieced it together. If it's internal, Vincent said slowly, then we have a traitor close enough to know your secrets. If it's external, we have an enemy smart enough to outthink us. Both possibilities end with Isabella in a crosshair. Vincent moved to the bar, poured himself a drink this time, drank it in one swallow. What do you want to do? Dominic turned from the window. I want you to make calls, quiet ones. I need to know if anyone in Boston has been watching Isabella. I need to know if any of our people have been asking questions about the ledger. And I need to know who has the resources and the motive to make a play like this. That's a long list, boss. We've made enemies. Start with the Marchetti family. They've been quiet for too long. Vincent nodded. And the deadline? 72 hours from when the video was taken, I assume. Call it 2 days from now. Are you going to give it to them? Dominic met his underboss's eyes. Would you, if it were your daughter? Vincent did not hesitate. In a heartbeat. Even knowing what it would cost. Even knowing. Dominic smiled without humor. You're a better man than me, Vincent, or a more foolish one. I'm not the one they're testing. After Vincent left to begin making his quiet inquiries, Dominic sat alone in the study, the phone dark on his desk, the video playing on a loop in his mind. Isabella walking across a parking garage, unaware. A red dot tracking her movement with mechanical precision. The frozen frame of a daughter who had tried so hard to escape her father's shadow only to find it stretching across state lines and 8 years of silence. He had told himself distance was protection. He had believed that if she hated him enough, if she stayed far enough away, the stain of his choices would not touch her. But blood was blood. Legacy was legacy. You could run to Boston, could become a surgeon, could save lives instead of taking them, and still the sins of the father would find you in a parking garage with a laser sight painting targets on your back. The storm began to fade, rain softening to a steady rhythm against glass. Dominic poured the bourbon he had not drunk earlier, this time lifted it to his lips, let the burn ground him in the moment. He thought about Maria, his wife, dead 12 years from a cancer that had eaten her from the inside while she smiled for their daughter and pretended everything was fine. She had known what he was, had married him anyway, had made him promise only one thing. Keep Isabella out of this world. Let her be clean. He had kept that promise right up until it became impossible. His phone rang, not a text, a call, unknown number. Dominic answered without speaking. A voice came through, electronically distorted, gender indeterminate. Mr. Salvatore, I trust you received my message. I received it. Then you understand the terms. I understand you think threatening my daughter will make me cooperate. A sound that might have been laughter filtered through whatever device was masking the voice. I don't think, Mr. Salvatore. I know. Because you are a man who has spent 25 years building a reputation for doing whatever is necessary to protect what's yours. Your daughter stopped being yours 8 years ago in her mind. But in your mind, she's still the little girl you taught to ride a bike in City Park. Still the teenager who asked you why you carried a gun. Still the woman you watch from a distance, because you can't bear to let her go completely. Dominic said nothing. The silence was its own response. 72 hours, the voice continued. The ledger, complete and unedited, in exchange for your daughter's continued existence. You will receive instructions on where to deliver it. If you attempt to copy it, we will know. If you involve law enforcement, she dies. If you try to find us, she dies. If you do anything other than exactly what you are told, she dies. Do you understand? I understand you're making a mistake. Am I? You're assuming the ledger is more valuable to me than Isabella. The voice paused. Isn't it? Your father spent 30 years compiling it. You've spent 15 protecting it. It's the only thing keeping the other families from tearing yours apart. Without it, you're just another aging boss waiting for a younger man to put a bullet in your skull. With it, you're untouchable. So yes, Mr. Salvatore, I'm betting it's more valuable than a daughter who hasn't spoken to you since she was 20. Dominic closed his eyes. You're wrong. Then you'll deliver the ledger. I'll consider it. Consider quickly. Time is a currency you're spending faster than you realize. The line went dead. Dominic sat in the darkness of his study, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to silence. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming under streetlights. Jazz music drifted up from the quarter, eternal and unbothered by the violence men conducted in penthouses and parking garages. He thought about choices, the ones that built a life and the ones that destroyed it. The decision to join his father's organization at 23. The decision to marry Maria despite knowing what it would mean for her. The decision to have a child and pretend he could keep her separate from the blood that paid for her private schools and her medical degree and her freedom to choose a different path. Every choice had seemed reasonable at the time, necessary. The only option available to a man born into this world with this name and these expectations. But they had led here, to a video of his daughter marked for death, to a voice on the phone offering an exchange that was no exchange at all, because either choice destroyed something he could not afford to lose. He opened his laptop, navigated to a folder buried under 3 layers of encryption, opened a file he had not accessed in months. Inside were photographs. Isabella at her medical school graduation, hood draped over her shoulders, smile genuine. Isabella at the hospital, in scrubs, conferring with a colleague outside an operating room. Isabella jogging along the Charles River on a Sunday morning, earbuds in, face peaceful. He paid a private investigator in Boston to send updates quarterly. The man thought he was tracking a deadbeat dad's ex-wife for child support purposes. He had no idea he was documenting the life of a woman trying desperately to be nothing like her father. Dominic studied the photographs, memorizing details he had already memorized a dozen times. The way Isabella's expression shifted when she was thinking through a complex problem. The efficiency of her movements, no wasted motion, everything purposeful. The distance she maintained from other people, even colleagues, as though intimacy was a risk she could not afford. She had learned that from him. The walls, the calculation, the assumption that everyone eventually wanted something you could not give. He had given her many things over the years. Money she refused after turning 18. Advice she ignored. Apologies she never acknowledged. But he had never given her the one thing she asked for during that last fight. He had never walked away from the life that made her ashamed to carry his name. Now that life was demanding payment, not in blood or money or territory, in the one currency that still meant something. His phone buzzed. Text message from Vincent. I made contact with our people in Boston. They're watching her. No sign of external surveillance yet, but if it's professional, we wouldn't see it until they wanted us to. Dominic typed back. Keep them at a distance. If she notices, she'll run, and then we lose her completely. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Vincent was choosing his words carefully. Boss, if you're thinking about going up there yourself, I should come with you. Dominic smiled at the screen. Vincent knew him too well. Not yet. First, I need to understand who's making this play. Any theories? Dominic considered. The threat was sophisticated. Professional surveillance in Boston. Access to information about the ledger's existence. The confidence to make demands of a man who had spent 25 years ensuring people understood that threatening him was suicide. Someone with resources. Someone who knows enough about our operation to know the ledger exists, but not enough to know where I keep it. Someone who thinks Isabella is leverage instead of understanding. She's the one thing I can't negotiate with. Vincent's response came quickly. That describes half the people who want you dead. Narrow it to the ones smart enough to stay alive this long. Dominic set the phone down, stood, walked to the window again. The river flowed past, dark and eternal, carrying the city's secrets toward the Gulf. He had thrown bodies into that river when he was younger, had watched men disappear beneath its surface with the same indifference it showed to rainfall and trash and time. The river did not judge. It simply received and carried away. He wondered if Isabella understood that about medicine, that she spent her days fighting a current that always, eventually, won, that she could save 1,000 lives and death would still take its share, that the difference between her world and his was not that hers was clean and his was dirty, but that hers came with the illusion of virtue. They were both trying to hold back the inevitable, she with scalpels and sutures, he with fear and force. Neither of them would succeed in the end. But maybe that was not the point. Maybe the point was simply choosing which impossible battle to fight. His phone rang again. This time, a number he recognized. Detective Tommy Brennan, Boston PD. A man who owed Dominic a favor from 6 years ago when Dominic had quietly arranged for his sister to disappear from an abusive marriage and start over in Seattle with a new name and enough money to be free. Tommy had never asked how Dominic knew about his sister's situation, had never asked what it cost to make a woman vanish from one life and reappear in another. He had simply accepted the gift and understood that one-day payment would be requested. That day had apparently arrived. Dominic, I was wondering when you'd call. You knew I would. I'm a detective, remember? Your daughter lives in my city. Someone just tried to grab her outside her apartment 3 hours ago. My people intervened. 3 suspects in custody. You want to tell me what's going on, or should I guess? Dominic felt the world tilt slightly. She's all right. Shaken but unharmed. The suspects aren't talking, but they're not local talent. Military bearing. Professional gear. This wasn't some random grab. Where is she now? At the precinct, giving a statement. She thinks it was a mugging attempt. We haven't told her otherwise yet. Dominic closed his eyes, exhaled slowly. Don't, not until I get there. You're coming to Boston. I'm already packing. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Dominic, whatever you're into, whatever this is about, maybe it's time to involve federal authorities. These guys have resources, equipment, training. This is bigger than a family dispute. It's exactly a family dispute, Tommy, just not the kind you're thinking. Then what kind? The kind where the only people I can trust are the ones who have as much to lose as I do. Another pause. I'll keep her safe until you arrive. But Dominic, when you get here, you and I are going to have a conversation about what you've brought to my city. Fair enough. The line disconnected. Dominic stood motionless, processing. The timeline had just collapsed. Whoever wanted the ledger had not waited for the 72 hours to expire. They had moved immediately, tried to grab Isabella before he could mobilize defenses. That meant they were either desperate or testing his response, possibly both. He pulled a leather bag from the closet, began packing with mechanical efficiency. 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, the pistol from the floor safe, cleaned and loaded, a phone with encrypted contacts that could reach people in 15 cities if needed. He did not pack the ledger. Not yet. That decision still balanced on the edge of impossible. Vincent arrived as he was zipping the bag closed. I heard. Boston PD has her. Tommy Brennan called. Vincent nodded. He knew the name, knew the favor, knew that Dominic calling it meant the situation had escalated past the point of quiet solutions. I'm coming with you. I need you here. If this is a distraction, if someone's making a move on our operations while I'm in Boston, you're the only one I trust to hold it together. Vincent's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. Then take Eddie Chen. He's good in a crisis and he knows Boston. Eddie Chen was the family's financial manager, late 50s, brilliant with numbers, surprisingly competent with violence when circumstances required. Dominic considered, nodded. Have him meet me at the airport in an hour. And Vincent, start putting out feelers. I need to know who knew I was lying about destroying the ledger. Start with people close to my father. Anyone who might have guessed I'd keep it. That's a short list. Then it should be easy to narrow down. After Vincent left, Dominic stood alone in the penthouse one final time, looking at the city he had controlled for a quarter century. The lights stretched to the horizon, each one representing lives and choices and consequences rippling outward in patterns too complex to fully comprehend. He had built an empire on the principle that power came from knowing what people wanted and making them pay for it. Money, protection, silence, revenge. Everyone wanted something, and Dominic Salvatore had spent his adult life being the man who could provide it for a price. But now someone had turned that principle against him, had identified what he wanted most, what he could not live without, and named a price he might not be able to pay. The ledger or Isabella, his past or his future, the machinery of power that kept him alive or the daughter who wanted nothing to do with him. He picked up his bag, took one last look at the photographs still open on his laptop, closed it without saving. Some things you did not need to save because they were already burned into memory deep enough to hurt. Then he walked out of the penthouse, locked the door behind him, and headed for the elevator that would carry him down to street level and toward a choice he had spent 8 years trying to avoid. The storm had passed, but the air still tasted of rain and electricity. Lightning flickered in the distance, over the gulf, promising more weather to come. Dominic climbed into his car, set the bag on the passenger seat, started the engine. The city stretched out before him, familiar and unknowable, home and prison both. He had told himself for 8 years that Isabella was better off without him. That distance was protection. That if she stayed far enough away from the Salvatore name, she could be clean. But distance, he now understood, was just another illusion. The same as virtue, the same as redemption. Blood called to blood across any distance. Sins echoed through generations, no matter how far you ran. And sometimes the only way to protect what you loved was to become the thing you had spent years trying to stop being. The monster, the boss, the man who made impossible choices and lived with the weight of them until the weight became who you were. Dominic put the car in gear and drove toward the airport, toward Boston, toward a daughter who would not want to see him, and a confrontation he could not avoid. The rain began again as he reached the highway, soft at first, then building to a downpour that forced him to slow, to focus, to navigate by instinct through a world rendered gray and streaming. Behind him, the city lights faded into rain and distance. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, Isabella was giving a statement to police about men who had tried to grab her for reasons she could not begin to understand. She would understand soon enough. And when she did, when she learned that her father's past had finally caught up to her present, when she realized that 8 years of distance had protected her from exactly nothing, she would hate him even more completely than before. Dominic could live with that. He had lived with worse. What he could not live with was the alternative. The video on loop in his mind. The red dot tracking across her back. The frozen frame of a daughter marked for death because her father had made choices decades ago that still demanded payment. The ledger sat in his penthouse, locked in a safe, containing the power to destroy empires or save one life. It was not a choice at all, really. It had never been. Boston greeted Dominic Salvatore with the kind of cold that had teeth. Not the wet chill of New Orleans winters, but something sharper, cleaner, cutting through his coat as he stepped out of Logan Airport into air that tasted of salt and diesel. Eddie Chen waited beside a black sedan, his face unreadable in the way of men who had learned not to show emotion in parking lots where cameras watched everything. Eddie was 55, had been the Salvatore family's financial manager for 18 years, and looked like someone's accountant uncle until circumstances required otherwise. Then the softness fell away, and what remained was a man who had survived the Hong Kong handover, immigration, and 2 decades in an organization where mistakes meant unmarked graves. They did not embrace, did not speak until the car doors closed and Eddie guided them onto the highway toward downtown Boston. Tommy Brennan has her at the precinct in Roxbury. She finished giving her statement an hour ago. They're holding the 3 suspects without bail, but none of them are talking. Dominic watched the city slide past the window. Buildings pressed close to the highway, brick and glass, and the accumulated weight of history that cities like Boston wore like armor. What did she tell them? That she was walking to her car. 3 men approached. One grabbed her arm. She screamed. Plainclothes officers intervened before they could get her into a vehicle. She thinks it was an attempted mugging. She doesn't suspect anything else. Eddie glanced at him. Boss, she's a surgeon. She thinks in terms of probabilities and evidence. Random street crime is more probable than her estranged father's enemies tracking her across state lines. Estranged. The word sat between them like a third passenger. Dominic did not correct it because it was true. 8 years of silence built walls that phone calls and birthday cards could not breach. Tommy said the suspects are professionals, former military. He's right. I had our people check their backgrounds. 2 Marines, 1 Army Ranger. All left service under circumstances that made them available for this kind of work. They've been freelancing through a company called Blackwood Solutions for the past 3 years. Dominic knew the name. Blackwood did work for people who needed things done quietly and had money to ensure silence. Corporate security, executive protection, and occasionally jobs that existed in the gray space between legal and necessary. Who hired them? That's where it gets interesting. The contract came through an encrypted platform, payment in cryptocurrency, no names attached, but the amount was significant. $200,000 for a clean grab and delivery. $200,000 to kidnap a surgeon. Enough money that professionals would take the risk. Not enough that it represented the resources of a major organization. Someone wealthy but not institutional. Someone with access to Blackwood's services but not to better options. Where were they supposed to deliver her? Eddie pulled a folded paper from his jacket, handed it across. Coordinates: latitude and longitude for a location in New Hampshire, just across the Massachusetts border. Dominic pulled out his phone, entered the numbers into a mapping application. The pin dropped on what appeared to be an empty stretch of forest near Nashua. You send anyone to check it. Two of our best. They reported back an hour ago. It's a warehouse. Abandoned officially, but there are recent tire tracks. Someone's been using it. Dominic studied the map, the warehouse's position relative to Boston, the highways that would carry a kidnapped woman from the city to that empty building where no one would hear her scream. The precision of it suggested planning. Time. Resources. I want surveillance on that location. I want to know if anyone goes near it. Eddie nodded. Already done. They drove in silence for a while, the city thickening around them, traffic slowing as rush hour bled into evening. Dominic thought about Isabella giving her statement to police, describing 3 men who grabbed her, unaware that her father was flying north to prevent worse men from trying again. She's going to find out I'm here, Dominic said. Probably. She's going to be angry. Eddie allowed himself a small smile. Boss, she's been angry for 8 years. This just gives her a reason to express it. The precinct was a brick building that had stood since the 1960s, functional and unlovely, in the way of government architecture built during decades when aesthetics came second to budget. Tommy Brennan met them in the lobby, a compact man in his early 40s with the careful posture of someone who had learned early that being underestimated was an advantage. Dominic, it's been a while. They shook hands. Tommy's grip was firm, professional, the handshake of men who had done business but were not friends. Dominic respected that. Friendship complicated things. Debts were cleaner. I appreciate you calling me. Tommy glanced at Eddie, back to Dominic. Your daughter's in conference room 3. She doesn't know you're coming. I didn't think she would. Dominic, before you go in there, you need to understand something. She's a victim in an attempted kidnapping. That makes her my responsibility. Whatever your business is, whatever you've brought to my city, it doesn't change that. Dominic met his eyes. I'm not here to cause trouble, Tommy. I'm here to prevent it. By doing what? Taking her back to New Orleans. Surrounding her with men with guns, that's not protection. That's trading one kind of danger for another. The danger is already here. I didn't bring it. I'm just responding to it. Tommy studied him for a long moment. She's not the same girl who left New Orleans 8 years ago. I know. She's built a life here, a good one. She saves lives, Dominic, real lives, not the kind of lives you and I deal with in our work. I know that too. Tommy sighed. Conference room 3, down the hall, second door on the left. I'm giving you 10 minutes. After that, I'm coming in, and we're having the conversation you've been avoiding since you landed. Dominic walked down a hallway that smelled of coffee and industrial cleaner, his footsteps echoing on linoleum worn smooth by decades of cops and criminals and victims all walking the same path toward different forms of justice. Conference room 3 had a window in the door, glass reinforced with wire mesh. Through it, he could see Isabella. She sat at a metal table, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee gone cold, staring at nothing. She wore the same scrubs from the video, coat draped over the back of her chair. Her hair had come loose from its ponytail, dark strands, framing a face that looked younger than 28 and older than it should. She looked like Maria, the same bone structure, the same way of holding tension in her shoulders when the world pressed too close, the same distance in her eyes when she retreated into herself to process something too large to face directly. Dominic knocked, 2 soft raps. She looked up, saw him through the wire-reinforced glass, and her expression shifted through surprise to recognition to something harder. He opened the door, stepped inside, closed it behind him. "Hello, Isabella." She stood, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the deliberate motion of someone putting distance between herself and a threat. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was controlled, professional. The voice she probably used with difficult family members in hospital waiting rooms when she had to deliver bad news about a surgery that had not gone as planned. "I heard what happened. I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I'm fine. You can leave now." Dominic did not move. "3 men tried to grab you outside your apartment. That's not fine." "It was an attempted mugging. The police stopped it. I gave my statement. That's the end of it." "It's not." Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. "What do you know about this?" "More than I want to. Less than I need to." She laughed. Short, bitter, the sound of someone who had heard too many non-answers from a man who dealt in them professionally. Of course. The great Dominic Salvatore, always knowing just enough to be dangerous and just enough to stay safe. "Isabella." Don't say my name like you have a right to it. You gave up that right 8 years ago when I told you I couldn't be part of your world anymore, and you let me go without fighting for me." The words landed like fists. Dominic absorbed them, did not flinch, because she was right and they both knew it. "I let you go because you asked me to. Because staying in New Orleans meant being part of something that was killing you. I thought distance would keep you safe." "Safe," her voice rose, control slipping. "Safe. I was just attacked by 3 men in a parking garage. Tell me how that's safe." Dominic pulled out his phone, opened the video, set it on the table between them. "Because this is what safe looks like when distance isn't enough." Isabella stared at the phone, at the frozen image of herself in a parking garage with a red laser dot painting her skull. Her hand went to her mouth. Her legs seemed to lose strength, and she sat down hard in the metal chair. "When?" "2 nights ago, before they tried to grab you. This was reconnaissance. They were confirming you matched their target profile." She looked up at him. "Who?" "I don't know yet, but they want something from me. Something valuable enough that they're willing to use you as leverage." Understanding dawned in her eyes, not the details but the shape of it, the old pattern reasserting itself. "This is because of you, because of what you do, what you are." Dominic sat down across from her. "Yes." "And you came here to what? Protect me. Make it right. 8 years, Dad. 8 years of silence, and now you show up because your enemies decided I'm worth threatening." The word "Dad" hit harder than any insult would have. She had not called him that since the fight, had not spoken to him at all except through lawyers when she changed her legal name from Salvatore to her mother's maiden name, Castellano, 3 years ago. "I came here because you're my daughter. Because whether you use my name or not, whether you talk to me or not, that doesn't change. And because the people who made that video will try again." Isabella closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet but no tears fell. Maria used to do that too. Cry without letting the tears escape. Hold the emotion behind a wall of will that nothing could breach. "What do they want?" Dominic hesitated. The ledger was not something Isabella knew about, was not something he had ever planned to burden her with. But lies and omissions had brought them to this conference room, to this conversation, and more lies would not build a bridge across 8 years of silence. "Records, documentation of transactions between my organization and various officials, judges, police, politicians. Information that could destroy careers and lives if it became public." "You mean evidence of corruption?" "Yes." "And you have this, these records." "My father kept them, passed them to me when he died. Their insurance. As long as we have them, the other families can't move against us without exposing themselves. Mutually assured destruction. Isabella laughed again, the same bitter sound. Of course. Of course that's what this is about. Not drugs or violence or any of the obvious things, just paperwork. Just proof that the system is as corrupt as everyone suspects but can't prove. Isabella. No, you don't get to Isabella me. You don't get to sit there and tell me that I'm in danger because you've been sitting on evidence that could clean up the entire city, the entire region, and you've kept it locked away because it protects your business interests. It's more complicated than that. It's always more complicated. That's what you said when Mom asked you to stop. When she begged you to get out, to take the money you'd already made and walk away, and you said it was complicated. And she believed you. She died believing you were going to figure it out, going to find a way to be a better man. Dominic felt something crack inside his chest. A fault line that had been there for 12 years, since Maria's funeral, since watching Isabella stand beside her mother's grave and refuse to look at him. Your mother understood what she was marrying. She knew who I was. She knew who you were. She kept hoping you'd become who you could be. There's a difference. The door opened. Tommy Brennan stepped inside, his expression neutral. Time's up. Dominic, I need you to come with me. Dr. Salvatore, sorry, Dr. Castellano, you're free to go. We have your contact information if we need anything else. Isabella stood, grabbed her coat. At the door, she stopped, looked back at Dominic. Don't follow me. Don't send your people to watch me. Don't call. I've built a life here without you, and I'm going to keep it that way. Then she was gone, footsteps receding down the hallway, leaving Dominic alone with Tommy and the weight of words that could not be unsaid. Tommy closed the door. That looked productive. Dominic said nothing. You want to tell me what's really going on? Why professional kidnappers want your daughter badly enough to risk an operation in my city? Dominic stood, walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot was filling with the evening shift change, cops arriving for night duty, civilians leaving after giving statements or posting bail. The machinery of justice turning with the same indifference as the Mississippi River carrying bodies to the Gulf. Someone wants information I have. They think threatening Isabella will make me give it to them. Will it? I'm considering my options. Tommy moved to stand beside him. Dominic, I'm going to be straight with you. I owe you a debt. You helped my sister when no one else could. You asked for nothing in return. That bought you this conversation, this courtesy. But it doesn't buy you permission to turn my city into a war zone. I'm not planning a war. Then what are you planning? Dominic thought about the ledger, about the warehouse in New Hampshire, about Isabella walking out of the precinct into a night that contained men with encrypted phones and enough money to buy violence. I'm planning to find out who's behind this and make them regret it. Through legal channels. Dominic looked at him. Tommy sighed. Yeah, that's what I thought. They released the 3 suspects 6 hours later on a technicality. No weapons found, no direct evidence of intent to kidnap versus simple assault, and lawyers who materialized faster than should have been possible with better arguments than street criminals should have been able to afford. Tommy called Dominic as they walked out of the building. Someone's protecting them, someone with resources. Track them. Already on it. But Dominic, if they lead us somewhere and you get there first, there are going to be consequences. I can live with consequences. Can Isabella? The question hung in the air after Tommy disconnected. Dominic sat in the hotel room Eddie had secured, one of those corporate places near the financial district where anonymity was assumed and questions were not asked. The room overlooked the harbor, lights reflecting off water that looked black in the darkness. Eddie knocked, entered without waiting for permission. Our people followed the suspects. They went to a parking garage in Quincy, got into a van, drove to the New Hampshire border, lost them in the state forest near where those coordinates pointed. They're going back to the warehouse. Or to whoever hired them. Dominic pulled up the map on his phone again. The coordinates. The warehouse. 50 miles from Boston, deep enough into forest that screams would not carry, close enough that transporting a kidnapped woman would take less than an hour. I want to know who owns that property. Eddie pulled out his tablet, fingers moving across the screen. Already checked. It's owned by a shell company. Blackwood Solutions, same contractor that employed the kidnappers, which is owned by another shell company, which is owned by a trust. I can keep digging, but it's going to take time to unravel. How much time? Days, maybe a week. Dominic did not have a week. The 72-hour deadline was counting down, and whoever had made that video knew exactly how long he could operate in Boston before his absence from New Orleans created opportunities for enemies. His phone buzzed. Text message from Vincent Rosso. Boss, we have a problem. The Marchetti family is asking questions about your absence. They're probing our operations, testing boundaries. Dominic typed back, how aggressive. Nothing overt, but their people are in places they shouldn't be, having conversations they shouldn't be having. It feels like they're preparing for something. The timing was not coincidental. Someone in New Orleans knew he was in Boston, knew he was distracted, was using that distraction to position pieces on a board he could not see. Eddie watched him process. We need to go back. Not yet. Boss, if the Marchetti family moves while you're gone, Vincent can't hold them alone. We'll lose territory, lose face, and in our business, that's the same as losing everything. I'm not leaving Isabella unprotected. She doesn't want your protection. She said so herself. Dominic set the phone down. What she wants and what she needs are not the same thing. Eddie was quiet for a moment. With respect, boss, I've known you for 18 years. I've never seen you make decisions based on emotion. You've always been clear-eyed about costs and benefits, about what we can afford to protect and what we have to sacrifice. Isabella made her choice 8 years ago. She walked away. She doesn't want to be part of this world. Maybe the kindest thing you can do is let her live with that choice. The words were logical, rational, the kind of advice Dominic would have given to anyone else in his position. But Isabella was not anyone else. She was the person Maria had made him promise to protect, the last piece of his wife that still breathed and moved through the world. The evidence that once, briefly, he had been something more than a man who solved problems with fear and money. No. Boss. I said no. We stay in Boston until this is resolved. Whatever the Marchetti family is planning, Vincent can handle it. And if he can't, then maybe we were weaker than I thought. Eddie nodded slowly. He knew better than to argue when Dominic's voice took that tone. What's the play then? Dominic stood, walked to the window, looked out at the harbor and the lights of planes descending toward Logan and the vast darkness of the Atlantic beyond. We find Isabella. We put protection on her whether she wants it or not, and we find out who's behind this before they try again. She's not going to cooperate. She doesn't have to. She just has to stay alive long enough for me to end this. They found Isabella at Massachusetts General Hospital despite her best efforts to disappear into her routine. Eddie's contacts in the hospital administration provided her schedule. Morning rounds starting at 6, surgery rotation from 8 to noon, afternoon consultations, evening notes. The rhythm of a resident's life, exhausting and consuming, leaving no space for anything except medicine and sleep. Dominic did not approach her, did not make his presence known. He simply arranged for people to be where she was. A man reading a newspaper in the hospital cafeteria. A woman jogging the same route Isabella took along the Charles River each morning. A night shift security guard who was not actually employed by the hospital, but whose credentials were good enough to pass casual inspection. Tommy called on the third day. "I know what you're doing. I have reports of your people all over the hospital. This is stalking, Dominic. I could arrest them. They're not breaking any laws. They're just in public places where my daughter happens to be. It's going to spook her when she figures it out. Better spooked than dead." Tommy was silent for a moment. The 3 suspects we released, they disappeared. Van was found abandoned near the New Hampshire border. No sign of them since. They went to ground. Or whoever hired them decided they were liabilities and cleaned up loose ends. The thought had occurred to Dominic. 3 former military contractors who had failed a job and could potentially identify their employer. In his business, that kind of liability got resolved permanently. "Have you found any bodies?" "Not yet, but we're looking." After Tommy hung up, Dominic sat in the hotel room and thought about the shape of the threat. Professional kidnappers who vanished after failure. A warehouse in New Hampshire that might be a drop point or might be a kill site. A deadline that was counting down toward a choice he did not want to make. And underneath it all, the question that kept circling back: who knew about the ledger? His father had kept its existence secret from everyone except his most trusted advisors. Dominic had told no one except Vincent that he still possessed it. The number of people who could have known, could have passed that information to someone willing to threaten Isabella, was small. Which meant either someone in his organization had betrayed him, or someone outside had been digging through old connections and pieced together enough fragments to guess the truth. His phone rang. Unknown number. Dominic answered without speaking. The same distorted voice from before. "Mr. Salvatore, I trust you've had time to consider my offer. Your people failed. I have my daughter under protection. Your leverage is gone." A sound like laughter, filtered and mechanical. "Is it? Tell me, Dominic, how long can you maintain surveillance on Dr. Castellano? A week? A month? Eventually, you'll have to go back to New Orleans. Your business requires your presence. The Marchetti family is already testing your borders. Vincent Russo is competent, but he's not you. Sooner or later, you'll have to choose between protecting Isabella and protecting your empire." "You seem very informed about my business." "I make it my business to be informed. Just as I know that Isabella is currently in operating room 6, performing a coronary bypass on a 63-year-old man named Richard Chen. Just as I know her apartment building has a back entrance that your surveillance hasn't covered. Just as I know that you're running out of time." Dominic felt ice settle in his stomach. "What do you want?" "The same thing I wanted 3 days ago. The ledger, complete and unedited. You have 48 hours remaining. Instructions for delivery will follow." "And if I refuse?" "Then Dr. Castellano will have an unfortunate accident. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. A car that doesn't stop at a crosswalk. A patient's angry family member with a gun. A gas leak in her apartment building. I'm patient, Mr. Salvatore. I can wait for the right opportunity. Can you?" The line went dead. Dominic called Eddie. "Get everyone we have to the hospital. Now, Isabella's in surgery. I want eyes on every entrance, every exit, every floor." "Boss, what happened?" "They know her schedule. They know where she is right now. They know about the back entrance we missed." Eddie did not ask more questions. He made calls, sent texts, mobilized the small team Dominic had brought to Boston. Within 20 minutes, 8 people were positioned throughout Massachusetts General Hospital, trying to look like visitors and staff while watching for threats they could not identify. Dominic stood in the parking garage where the video had been taken, looking at the spot where Isabella's car had been parked 2 nights ago, where a red laser dot had marked her for death. He thought about the voice on the phone, the confidence, the detailed knowledge of Isabella's movements. This was not random. This was not opportunistic. Someone had been watching her for weeks, maybe months, building a profile, learning her patterns, preparing for the moment when Dominic would need to be threatened into surrender. Which meant the deadline was not arbitrary. 48 hours was not enough time to identify the threat and eliminate it. It was exactly enough time to feel pressure, to make mistakes, to choose between bad options and worse ones. The ledger or Isabella, his insurance or his daughter. The thing that kept him alive in a world built on betrayal or the person who represented everything that world had cost him. His phone rang again, this time a number he recognized, Vincent. "Boss, we have a situation. The Marchetti family just made a move on our dock operations. 3 of our guys are in the hospital. They're claiming we encroached on their territory, that this is a legitimate response to our aggression." "We didn't encroach." "I know that, you know that, but they're using your absence to rewrite history, and some of our own people are starting to ask questions. Why you're in Boston, when you're coming back, whether you're still in control." Dominic closed his eyes. The machinery was working exactly as designed. Pressure in Boston, pressure in New Orleans, forces closing in from multiple directions, compressing his options until only one choice remained. "Hold the line, Vincent. Don't escalate, don't retaliate, just hold." "For how long?" 48 hours. "Boss, in 48 hours, we could lose everything we've built." "Then we lose it, but I'm not leaving Boston until this is finished." Vincent was quiet. Then, "She doesn't even want you there." "I know." "You're risking the family for someone who walked away from it." "Yes." Another silence, longer this time. When Vincent spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "Maria would be proud of you." Dominic felt something tighten in his throat. Maria would tell me I was being an idiot, that I should have walked away from all of this 20 years ago when I still could. Maybe, but she'd also say that protecting Isabella was the only choice that mattered, that everything else was just business, and business could be rebuilt. But family, once you lost that, you never got it back. "You knew her better than I thought." "She used to talk to me sometimes, when you were away on business. She was lonely, boss. She married a man who was gone more than he was home, who came back with blood on his hands and secrets in his eyes. But she never regretted it. She told me that once, near the end. Said marrying you was the best mistake she ever made." Dominic turned away from the parking garage, walked toward the hospital entrance. "I'm going to end this, Vincent, one way or another, 48 hours. I'll hold the line." Inside the hospital, Dominic navigated corridors that smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, past rooms where people fought for their lives, or waited to hear whether their loved ones had won or lost that fight. He found a waiting area outside the surgical wing, sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, and watched doctors and nurses move with the practiced efficiency of people for whom crisis was routine. 4 hours later, Isabella emerged from the operating room. She wore scrubs, a surgical cap, exhaustion carved into her face. She saw him, stopped, and for a moment something flickered across her expression that might have been concern or might have been resignation. She walked over, sat down 2 chairs away, maintaining distance. "You're still here." "I'm still here." "The surgery went well. Mr. Chen is going to make it." "I'm glad." They sat in silence. Around them, the hospital continued its work. A code blue announcement over the intercom. Families embracing or weeping. The eternal rhythm of life and death conducting its business with indifference to individual stories. "There are people watching me," Isabella said finally. "In the cafeteria, outside my apartment. I'm not stupid. I know they're yours." "Yes. I told you not to do this." "You did. And you did it anyway." "Yes." Isabella turned to look at him. "Why? After 8 years of respecting my wishes, of staying away like I asked, why now?" Dominic met her eyes. "Because the people who want to hurt you won't respect your wishes. They don't care that you changed your name or moved to Boston or spent 8 years building a life separate from mine. They only care that hurting you hurts me. So this is about you, about your pride, your reputation." "No, this is about the fact that I failed your mother. I couldn't protect her from the stress of my life, from the fear of what I was, from the cancer that ate her alive while I was busy protecting business interests that meant nothing compared to her. I won't fail you the same way." Isabella's eyes filled. "You can't protect me from everything." "I can try." She looked away. "I save lives, Dad. That's what I do. I cut people open and fix their hearts and send them back to their families. And every time I succeed, I tell myself I'm balancing some cosmic scale, that every life I save makes up for the life you've lived. But it doesn't, does it? No matter how many people I help, it doesn't change what you are or what that's cost us." Dominic had no answer to that, because she was right, and they both knew it. Isabella stood. "I have rounds in 6 hours. I need to sleep. Your people can watch my building if it makes you feel better. But don't come to my apartment. Don't knock on my door. If this ends, if whatever threat you're dealing with goes away, I want you to go back to New Orleans and let me live my life. And if it doesn't end." She looked at him with eyes that were her mother's eyes, that held the same mixture of love and sorrow that Maria had carried for 20 years of marriage to a man who could not be what she needed. "Then I guess we'll both find out what matters more, your empire or your daughter." She walked away, white coat trailing behind her, leaving Dominic alone in a waiting room full of people who were hoping for miracles from doctors who could cut and suture, but could not heal the wounds that went deeper than flesh. 48 hours until the deadline. 48 hours to decide whether he would give up the only insurance that kept him alive or watch his daughter become a target for the rest of her life. Outside, night fell over Boston. The city lit up, beautiful and indifferent. In New Orleans, Vincent Russo was holding a line that was starting to fracture. In New Hampshire, a warehouse waited in darkness for cargo that might still be delivered. And somewhere in the city, a man with a distorted voice and detailed knowledge of Dominic's life was counting down the hours until a father would have to choose which future to sacrifice. Dominic pulled out his phone, opened the encrypted folder, looked at the ledger one more time. 25 years of careful documentation, evidence that could destroy lives and end careers, the accumulated weight of his father's paranoia and his own caution. He thought about what Eddie had said, that Isabella had made her choice 8 years ago, that walking away from her was the kindest thing he could do. But Eddie was wrong. Walking away was not kindness. It was cowardice dressed up as respect. And Dominic Salvatore had been many things in his 52 years, had made compromises that hollowed him out and choices that kept him awake, but he had never been a coward. He closed the folder, made a call. When Vincent answered, Dominic spoke 4 words. "Bring me the ledger." The die was cast. The choice was made. In 48 hours, he would trade everything he had built for a daughter who did not want his protection and might never forgive him for providing it anyway. But she would be alive, and in the end, that was the only equation that mattered. The ledger arrived at dawn on the 3rd day, carried by Vincent Russo in a briefcase that looked ordinary enough to pass through airport security without question. They met in Dominic's hotel room overlooking Boston Harbor, neither man speaking as Vincent set the case on the desk and stepped back. 25 years of secrets, his father's legacy. The insurance policy that had kept Dominic Salvatore alive through wars and betrayals, and the slow grind of time that killed most men in his business before they reached 50. All of it contained in a device smaller than a pack of cigarettes. Vincent looked exhausted. The flight from New Orleans had been overnight, and the 48 hours before that had aged him in ways that had nothing to do with time. His jaw was tight, his eyes hollow, the face of a man who had been holding a line that was starting to collapse. The Marchetti family took 2 more of our operations while I was in the air. They're not even pretending anymore. They know you're here. They know you're distracted. And they're moving like they've been planning this for months. Dominic opened the briefcase. The USB drive sat in foam padding, black and unremarkable. He picked it up, felt its weight, thought about everything it represented. How bad is it? Bad enough that if you don't come back soon, there won't be anything to come back to. Our people are loyal, but loyalty has limits when they're getting hit, and their boss is 2,000 miles away protecting a daughter who doesn't want his protection. The words landed without malice. Vincent was simply stating facts, the way he had for 12 years, the way good underbosses did when their bosses needed truth more than comfort. I'll handle the Marchetti family when this is done. Will there be anything left to handle? Boss, I'm not questioning your choices. You're doing what a father should do, but you're also a crime boss, and crime bosses who show weakness get replaced. By enemies or by their own people. That's how this works. Dominic closed the briefcase, left the ledger inside. Then I get replaced, but Isabella lives. Vincent studied him for a long moment. You've changed. No, I've just stopped pretending that the things I told myself mattered actually do. After Vincent left to catch a flight back to New Orleans, and whatever remained of their organization, Dominic sat alone with the briefcase and thought about the choice he had made. Not the decision itself, which had been inevitable from the moment he saw the video, but what it meant about the man he had become. For 25 years, he had built his life on the principle that power came from leverage. That the man who knew the most secrets, who held the most insurance, who could destroy the most lives if necessary, was the man who survived. His father had taught him that. Angelo Salvatore had died believing it. But Angelo had died in his sleep, peacefully, business intact, enemies held at bay by the threat of mutual destruction. He had not lived long enough to watch his daughter walk away because she could not bear the weight of his choices. Had not felt the particular ache of knowing that everything you built meant nothing if the people you built it for would rather pretend you did not exist. Dominic's phone buzzed. Text message from the distorted voice that had been haunting him for 3 days. You have the ledger. Good. Instructions will arrive at noon. Come alone. Tell no one. Any deviation and Dr. Castellano's next surgery will be her last. The threat was precise, specific, the kind that came from someone who had thought through contingencies and prepared responses. Dominic had made enough threats in his life to recognize professionalism when he encountered it. He typed back, "How do I know you'll honor the exchange?" The response came quickly. "You don't, but you don't have alternatives. Noon, check your phone." The hours between dawn and noon passed with the slow weight of water dripping on stone. Dominic showered, dressed, checked his weapon even though he knew he would not be able to use it. The exchange would be designed to neutralize any advantage he might bring. Isolated location, surveillance, probably remote detonation devices if they were truly paranoid. He called Eddie Chen. "I need you to do something for me. If I don't check in by 6 tonight, I need you to deliver a package to Isabella." Eddie's voice was careful. "What kind of package?" "An envelope. It's in the hotel safe. Combination is 1822, Maria's birthday. Boss, what's in the envelope? A letter. Things I should have said 8 years ago. Things I might not get another chance to say. Eddie was silent for a moment. You're going to the exchange. Yes. Alone. Yes. That's suicide. Possibly, but it's the only play I have left. Let me come with you, or Tommy's people, someone. No, they were clear. I come alone or Isabella dies. And Eddie, if I don't come back, I need you to take the letter to her personally. Make sure she reads it. Make sure she understands. Understands what? Dominic looked out the window at the harbor, at the boats moving through water that had carried ships for 400 years, that would carry them for 400 more, indifferent to the small dramas of men who thought their choices mattered. That I was wrong about almost everything, but I was right about loving her. At 11:45, his phone chimed. Not a text. A file download, GPS coordinates and a time, 1 p.m. The location was the warehouse in New Hampshire, exactly where Dominic had suspected. The time gave him barely enough space to drive there, no room for preparation or backup or anything except following instructions. He took the briefcase, left the hotel, climbed into the rental car Eddie had secured. The drive north was autumn in New England, trees burning with color, sky sharp and blue, the kind of day that made you believe the world was beautiful even when you knew better. The coordinates led him off the highway, onto state roads that narrowed to county roads that became dirt tracks through forest that had been old when the Pilgrims arrived. No houses, no signs of civilization except the road itself and the tire tracks from vehicles that had come this way recently. The warehouse appeared where the GPS said it would, a metal structure rusting into the landscape, windows broken, loading dock empty. A single black SUV sat in the gravel parking area, windows tinted, engine running. Dominic parked 50 feet away, turned off the engine, waited. The SUV's door opened. A man stepped out. Late 30s, fit, wearing tactical gear without insignia. He held a rifle casually, pointed at the ground but ready to lift and fire in less than a second. The man gestured for Dominic to get out of the car. Dominic complied, moving slowly, hands visible. The man approached, patted him down with professional efficiency, found the pistol, removed it, tossed it into the SUV. The briefcase. Dominic held it up. Open it slowly. Dominic set it on the hood of his car, opened the latches, revealed the USB drive in its foam padding. The man pulled out a laptop, plugged in the drive, typed commands. Screens filled with files, documents, spreadsheets, the accumulated evidence of 25 years. He scrolled, spot-checking entries, nodding to himself. It's complete. I kept my end. Now keep yours. The man closed the laptop, ejected the drive, slipped it into a pocket. Walk into the warehouse. Someone's waiting to talk to you. I want confirmation that Isabella is safe. You'll get it, inside. Dominic studied the man's face, looking for tells, for anything that would indicate whether this was an execution or an actual exchange. The man's expression was professionally neutral, the face of someone who had done this before and would do it again. Dominic walked toward the warehouse. The metal door was ajar, rusty hinges screaming as he pushed it open. Inside, the space was vast and empty, concrete floor cracked, steel beams overhead supporting a roof with holes that let in columns of autumn light. At the far end, a figure stood beside a folding table. As Dominic's eyes adjusted to the dimness, the figure resolved into a man in his late 50s, well-dressed in a suit that cost more than most people made in a month. Silver hair, glasses, the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Dominic stopped 20 feet away. "I know you." The man smiled. "We've never met, but yes, you know who I am. Special Agent Marcus Toland, FBI Section Chief, soon to be Deputy Director if my nomination goes through." The pieces clicked into place. The professional surveillance, the resources, the detailed knowledge of Dominic's operations. An FBI section chief would have access to all of it. "You're in the ledger." "I am. Pages 47 through 53, if memory serves. Payments I received 20 years ago when I was a young field agent looking to supplement government salary. Favors I did for your father. Cases I buried. Evidence I lost. All documented with Angelo Salvatore's characteristic attention to detail." Marcus walked closer, hands in his pockets, relaxed. No weapon visible, but Dominic knew there would be one. Men like Marcus always had insurance. "I've spent 2 decades building a career on a foundation of sand, Dominic. Every promotion, every commendation, every step up the ladder, I've known that somewhere out there was a file that could destroy it all. When your father died, I thought maybe the threat died with him. But you kept the ledger. Of course you did. It's too valuable to destroy." "Was valuable," Dominic corrected. "You have it now." Marcus pulled the USB drive from his pocket, held it up to the light. "I do, but that's not quite the end of our business." Something cold settled in Dominic's stomach. "We had a deal, the ledger for Isabella's safety. And I'm keeping that deal. Your daughter is safe. She'll remain safe. But you, Dominic, you're a different problem. You've seen my face. You know I'm behind this. You know that an FBI section chief threatened your daughter and extorted evidence from you. That's not information I can let you walk away with." Dominic heard movement behind him. The tactical operator from outside, now blocking the door. Others emerging from the shadows of the warehouse, 4 in total, all armed, all professional. "You're going to kill me." "I'm going to make you disappear. There's a difference. You came to Boston to protect your daughter. You got involved in something beyond your depth. You vanished. It happens to men in your line of work. No one will be surprised. Isabella will grieve, Vincent Russo will take over your operations, and life will continue. Minus 1 crime boss and 1 piece of evidence that could have ruined my career." Dominic calculated distances, angles, odds. 5 trained operators with automatic weapons versus 1 52-year-old man with no gun and no backup. The math was not encouraging. Vincent will know something's wrong. Vincent will suspect, but he won't be able to prove anything. And frankly, with the Marchetti family tearing your organization apart, he'll have bigger problems than investigating his boss's disappearance. Marcus gestured to the operators. They moved forward, forming a perimeter. This was the moment. The point where Dominic Salvatore's choices caught up to him, where protecting his daughter meant sacrificing himself, where the price for 25 years of violence and compromise came due all at once. He thought about Isabella, about the letter in the hotel safe that Eddie would deliver if he did not check in, about Maria's grave in New Orleans where he had stood 12 years ago and promised to be better than he had been. He had failed that promise in most ways, but maybe, in this final moment, he could succeed in the only way that mattered. Then gunfire erupted. Not from Marcus's operators, but from outside the warehouse, the distinctive crack of rifles fired with precision. One of the operators dropped, then another. The remaining 3 scattered, taking cover behind steel beams, returning fire toward windows they could not see through. Marcus dove behind the folding table, pulled a pistol from a shoulder holster. "What did you do?" Dominic smiled. "I told Eddie to come if I didn't check in by 6. I didn't say anything about him not following me here." More gunfire. Controlled bursts, professional shooting. Eddie Chen and whoever he had brought were providing covering fire from multiple positions. The warehouse filled with the smell of cordite and the sound of bullets hitting metal. Dominic moved, not toward Marcus, but toward a side door half hidden in shadow. One of the operators tried to intercept him, rifles swinging up, but a shot from outside took the man in the shoulder, spinning him away. Dominic hit the door at a run, burst through into daylight and forest. Behind him, the firefight continued, Eddie's people keeping Marcus and his remaining operators pinned. He ran through trees, branches whipping his face, breath burning in lungs that were not as young as they used to be. He could hear pursuit behind him, shouts and crackling radios, and the organized chaos of professionals trying to contain a situation that had gone wrong. A hand grabbed his arm. Dominic spun, fist coming up, and stopped when he saw Eddie's face. "Boss, this way." Eddie pulled him deeper into the forest, moving with confidence born of reconnaissance. They ran for what felt like miles, but was probably less than one, emerging finally at a logging road where two vehicles waited, engines running. Tommy Brennan leaned against one of them, arms crossed. "You have a terrible habit of getting into situations you can't get out of alone." Dominic bent over, hands on knees, catching his breath. "How?" Eddie answered. "I've been following you since you left the hotel. Called Tommy when I saw where you were headed. He called some people. Federal marshals, not local cops. People who don't answer to Marcus Toland." Tommy pushed off the vehicle. "Speaking of which, Toland is about to have a very bad day. See, when Eddie called me with GPS coordinates for a warehouse in New Hampshire, I made some calls of my own. To the U.S. Attorney's Office, to the Inspector General, to people who take a very dim view of FBI section chiefs running illegal kidnapping operations. The ledger is currently being copied from Toland's pocket by federal marshals who just raided that warehouse, along with Toland himself and anyone working for him. You want to tell me what was on that drive that made an FBI section chief desperate enough to threaten your daughter?" Dominic straightened, looked Tommy in the eye. "Evidence of corruption going back 25 years, payments to officials, favors exchanged, the accumulated weight of how this city and a dozen others actually work beneath the surface." Tommy absorbed this. "Your father's work. And mine. And now it's in federal hands, which means a lot of people are going to have a very bad year, possibly including you." "Possibly." Tommy gestured to the vehicles. "Get in. We need to get you out of here before this turns into a jurisdiction nightmare. Eddie, you too. And Dominic, when this settles, you and I are going to have a long conversation about what you owe me now." They drove back to Boston in silence, Dominic in the back seat, watching forest give way to suburbs give way to city. His phone buzzed multiple times. Vincent, calling from New Orleans. Dominic let it ring. Whatever news Vincent had could wait until he had processed what had just happened. He had given up the ledger, the thing that had kept him safe for 15 years. The insurance policy that had prevented wars and maintained the delicate balance of power between families. And in exchange, he was still alive. Isabella was safe. And Marcus Toland was in federal custody with evidence of his crimes being copied and analyzed by people who would not bury it. The math should not have worked out. By every calculation Dominic knew, he should be dead in that warehouse, his body disappearing into New Hampshire forest where it would never be found. But Eddie had followed him. Tommy had made calls. And somewhere in the machinery of law enforcement, there were still people who believed that rules mattered more than favors. Dominic had spent his entire adult life betting against that belief, had built an empire on the assumption that everyone could be bought or threatened, that loyalty was temporary and honor was negotiable. He had been wrong, not completely but enough. They dropped him at the hotel. Eddie stayed in the car, but Tommy got out, walked Dominic to the entrance. Your daughter doesn't know any of this happened. No. Are you going to tell her? Dominic thought about Isabella's face in the police station, the exhaustion and anger, and the 8 years of distance that had not protected her from anything. I don't know. My advice, tell her. She's already angry at you. Might as well be angry at you for something you actually did instead of all the things she's imagined. When did you become a therapist? Tommy smiled. When I became a father. Kids have a way of showing you who you really are, usually when you're least prepared to face it. In the hotel room, Dominic retrieved the envelope from the safe, sat on the bed, opened it. Inside was a letter he had written at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, knowing he might not survive the exchange. The words looked different now. Written by a man who thought he was going to die, they carried a weight that felt both true and insufficient. He had tried to explain everything. His choices, his regrets, the ways he had failed Maria and Isabella both, the love that had persisted through years of silence and anger and mutual disappointment. But reading it now, alive when he should not be, he realized that words on paper could not carry what needed to be said. That some conversations required presence, vulnerability, the willingness to stand in front of someone and let them see you clearly. He tore the letter in half, then again, then kept tearing until it was confetti in his hands. Then he picked up his phone and called Isabella. She answered on the 4th ring. What? Not a question, a statement of exhaustion with his existence. I need to see you. No. Isabella, please, not at your apartment, not at the hospital, somewhere neutral, somewhere you feel safe. She was quiet for a long moment. There's a coffee shop near the hospital. Café Paradise. I'll be there in an hour. You get 15 minutes. She hung up before he could respond. Dominic showered, changed clothes, looked at himself in the mirror. 52 years old, gray in his hair, lines around his eyes, the accumulated weight of choices etched into a face that had once been young and certain. He wondered what Isabella would see when she looked at him. Whether she would see the father who had taught her to ride a bike, or the crime boss who had valued power over family, or some complicated mixture of both that defied easy categorization. Probably all of it, probably none of it. You could never predict what other people saw when they looked at you, especially people you had hurt. Café Paradiso was the kind of place medical residents went when they needed caffeine and quiet, tucked into a side street, small tables, espresso machine hissing. Isabella sat in the back corner, hands wrapped around a cup, staring at nothing. Dominic ordered coffee he would not drink, carried it to her table, sat down across from her. Thank you for coming. She did not look at him. 15 minutes, talk. The threat is over. The people who were watching you are gone. You're safe. How do you know? Because I gave them what they wanted. Now she looked at him. The records you mentioned, the evidence. Yes. So you chose me over your business. I chose you over everything. Isabella's expression did not soften. You want credit for that, for doing the bare minimum of what a father should do. No, I want you to understand that I know what it cost, and I'd do it again, every time, without hesitation. She lifted her coffee, sipped, set it down. Her hands were steady, surgeon's hands, used to making cuts that would heal or kill depending on precision and luck. Mom used to tell me that you were a good man in a bad situation, that you'd chosen a path before you understood where it led, and by the time you realized, it was too late to turn back. I believed her because I was a kid and I wanted to believe my father was good. Maria was kinder than I deserved. She loved you, which was probably the same thing. Isabella finally met his eyes. I'm not her, Dad. I don't have her capacity for seeing the best in people. I'm harder, colder, more like you, probably, which is something I've spent 8 years trying not to be. You're nothing like me. You save lives. You've built something clean and good. You did exactly what you should have done. And yet here we are, back in each other's orbits because your past won't stay buried. So tell me, what happens now? Do you go back to New Orleans and pretend this never happened? Do I go back to my life and hope your enemies don't decide I'm still valuable leverage? What's the end game here? Dominic thought about the ledger in federal hands, about Marcus Toland in custody, about the Marchetti family tearing apart his operations while he sat in a Boston coffee shop trying to rebuild a bridge his daughter had burned 8 years ago. I don't know. For the first time in 25 years, I genuinely don't know what comes next. Isabella almost smiled. That must be terrifying for you. The great Dominic Salvatore, always 3 steps ahead, suddenly flying blind. It is, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe I've spent too long thinking I could plan my way through life, control outcomes, manage risk. Maybe the only honest thing is to admit I don't control any of it. So what? You're going to change, become a different person at 52. That's not how it works. You are what your choices made you. You're right. I can't unmake 25 years. Can't bring back the people I hurt or undo the damage I've done. But I can try to be better going forward. Try to make choices that might eventually make you less ashamed to be my daughter. Isabella looked at him for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was softer than it had been. I was never ashamed of you. I was ashamed of what you did. There's a difference. And I was angry that you loved your business more than you loved us, more than you loved Mom, more than you loved me. I didn't. Then why did you stay in it? Why didn't you walk away when she asked, when I begged? Dominic had asked himself that question 1,000 times, had constructed elaborate justifications about responsibility and loyalty and the impossibility of leaving once you were in deep enough. But sitting across from his daughter in a coffee shop in Boston, those justifications felt like what they were. Excuses. Because I was afraid. Because the only identity I had was being Angelo Salvatore's son, and then Dominic Salvatore, boss of the Salvatore family. Because walking away meant admitting that I'd wasted my life on something worthless, and I wasn't brave enough to face that. Isabella's eyes filled. No tears fell, but they were there. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I'm trying to be honest now. Maybe too late, probably too late, but I'm trying. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so much like Maria that Dominic felt his chest tighten. I don't forgive you. I can't. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I don't hate you either, and maybe that's enough for now. It's more than I deserve. Yeah, it is. She stood, picked up her coffee. I have rounds in an hour. You should go back to New Orleans. Fix whatever you broke while you were here. And Dad, don't call me. Don't text. Don't send people to watch me. If I decide I want to talk to you again, I'll reach out. On my terms, understood. Understood. She walked to the door, stopped, looked back. For what it's worth, Mom would be proud that you chose me over the business. She always said that if you had to choose, you'd make the right choice. I didn't believe her, but she was right. Then she was gone, leaving Dominic alone with cold coffee and the realization that sometimes the right choice and the choice that fixed things were not the same. The flight back to New Orleans was at midnight. Dominic spent the intervening hours walking Boston, seeing the city Isabella had chosen, trying to understand what had drawn her here. The history, maybe, or the sense of starting over in a place where no one knew the Salvatore name, where she could be just Isabella Castellano, surgeon, defined by her hands and skill rather than blood and legacy. Eddie met him at the airport. Vincent's been calling. The Marchetti situation is bad. We lost the dock operations, 2 gambling houses, and 3 key people switched sides. He needs you back. I know. Boss, if we don't respond soon, there won't be a family to lead. Dominic looked out the window at planes taking off and landing, the eternal rhythm of departure and arrival. Then maybe there shouldn't be. Eddie stared at him. You can't mean that. Why not? My father built an empire on fear and bribery. I maintained it the same way. We told ourselves there were rules, that we were better than the alternatives, but we were still criminals. Still hurting people. Still poisoning the city we claimed to protect. Maybe the Marchetti family taking over is just a changing of the guard. Same crime, different name. And the people who depend on us. The people whose livelihoods are tied to our operations. We'll find other ways to survive. They always do. Eddie was quiet for a long moment. Vincent's not going to understand this. Vincent doesn't have to. He's a good man. He'll run things better than I did. He's not you. Exactly. The plane lifted off, Boston falling away beneath them, lights spreading to the horizon like spilled diamonds. Dominic closed his eyes, thought about Marcus Toland in federal custody, the ledger being analyzed by investigators who would trace every entry back to its source. Thought about the lives that would be destroyed when that evidence became public. Judges, cops, politicians, people who had thought they were safe because men like Angelo and Dominic Salvatore kept their secrets. All of it coming apart because Dominic had chosen his daughter over his insurance policy. The math still did not make sense. By every calculation he knew, he had made the wrong choice. Had sacrificed everything for a woman who did not want his protection and might never forgive him for providing it. But sitting in the airplane at 30,000 feet, watching stars wheel overhead through the window, Dominic thought about Maria's grave and the promise he had made. About Isabella's eyes in the coffee shop, seeing him clearly for the first time in 8 years. About the difference between the life you built and the life you wanted. And he realized that for the first time since his father died, possibly the first time in his adult life, he had made a choice based on love instead of fear. It had cost him everything, his insurance, his empire, the respect of men who valued power over principle. But he had his daughter's acknowledgement that he had done one thing right. And in the economy of regret and redemption, that might be enough. New Orleans appeared below, the Mississippi a dark ribbon cutting through lights, the city eternal and indifferent. Vincent waited at the airport, his face grim. Boss, we need to talk. I know. They drove through streets Dominic had known his entire life, past the restaurant where he conducted business, past the penthouse where the video had arrived 3 days ago, past everything he had built and was about to lose. Vincent spoke quietly. The Marchetti family made their final move tonight. They hit our remaining operations simultaneously. Most of our people are willing to negotiate surrender. They want assurances, protection, a place in the new organization. They don't want to die for a boss who left town to save a daughter who doesn't want him. I don't blame them. Boss, I can hold core territory. The restaurant, some of the gambling enough to rebuild. But you have to show strength. You have to prove you're still in control. Dominic looked out at the city. I'm not, though, in control. I gave up the one thing that kept us safe. I chose my daughter over the family, and I'd do it again. Vincent pulled the car over, turned to face him. Then, what are we doing? Why did I spend 15 years following you if you're just going to let it all collapse? Because that's what it deserved to do. Vincent, we built this on blood and fear and the corruption of every system that was supposed to protect people. My father did it. I did it. And maybe the honest thing, the only honorable thing left, is to let it end. And our people, the ones who trusted us. We'll be better off without us. The Marchetti family runs a tighter operation, less violence, more business-focused. It's still crime, but it's crime without the pretense of the old code. Vincent sat back, stared through the windshield. Maria was right about you. What? She told me once, near the end, that you were going to destroy yourself trying to be two people. The man you thought you had to be and the man you actually were. She said eventually you'd have to choose. I didn't understand what she meant then. I think I do now. Dominic felt the weight of 12 years pressing down. What else did she say? That she hoped you'd choose before it was too late. That she wanted Isabella to know her real father, not the performance you gave for the rest of us. Vincent started the car again. I think she'd say you finally made that choice. Just took you longer than it should have. They drove to the restaurant. Inside, a meeting was already in progress. The remaining captains and soldiers of the Salvatore family, 20 men who had followed Dominic for years, now gathered to discuss terms of surrender. Dominic walked in, and the room fell silent. He looked at faces he had known for decades. Men who had bled for him, killed for him, built their lives around loyalty to a boss who had just spent 3 days in Boston while their organization collapsed. I'm stepping down, effective immediately. Vincent Russo will negotiate terms with the Marchetti family. Anyone who wants to stay in the life will have a place. Anyone who wants out will get a stake, enough money to start over clean. No one gets hurt in the transition. That's my last order. Silence. Then one of the older captains, a man named Sal who had worked for Angelo before Dominic, spoke. Boss, you can't. This is your father's legacy. My father's legacy is the ledger, and I gave it to federal agents 3 hours ago. Everything he built, everything I maintained, it's all going to come out. The payments, the favors, the names. Within a month, half the judges and cops in this city will be under investigation. The Salvatore family is finished whether I step down or not. I'm just making it official. The room erupted. Voices overlapping, arguing, some angry, some resigned. Dominic let it wash over him, the sound of an empire ending, not with violence but with the simple acknowledgement that it had run its course. Vincent stood. Everyone out. I need to talk to the boss alone. The room emptied slowly, men casting backward glances, trying to understand what had just happened. When they were alone, Vincent closed the door. You really gave them the ledger. I did. That's going to destroy a lot of lives. I know, including mine, probably. But those lives were built on corruption and violence. Maybe they deserve to be destroyed. Vincent walked to the bar, poured 2 glasses of bourbon, handed one to Dominic. To 30 years, your father's and yours. They drank. The bourbon burned, familiar and final. What are you going to do now? Vincent asked. Dominic thought about Isabella in Boston, building a life without him. About Maria's grave that he visited every Sunday. About the city outside, eternal and indifferent to the small dramas of men who thought they mattered. I'm going to sell the penthouse, buy something small, maybe leave New Orleans entirely, find out who Dominic Salvatore is when he's not a boss anymore. And Isabella. She said she'd reach out on her terms, so I wait. And if she never does, at least I know she's alive and safe. That has to be enough. Vincent nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing, not the smart thing, not the thing that protects the organization, but the right thing. And in this business, that's rarer than you'd think. They finished their drinks in silence. Outside, the city continued its ancient rhythms, jazz drifting up from clubs, tourists stumbling between bars, and beneath it all, the machinery of crime adapting to new management, new rules, the eternal game played with different players. Dominic Salvatore's reign had lasted 25 years. had ended not with violence or betrayal, but with a choice to put love before power, family before empire, the uncertain future before the corrupt past. He had lost everything: his organization, his insurance, his identity as the man people feared and respected. But walking out of the restaurant into the New Orleans night, breathing air that tasted of rain and the river and possibility, Dominic felt something he had not felt in decades. Free. The weight of his father's expectations, gone. The burden of maintaining appearances, lifted. The constant calculation of advantage and threat and leverage, no longer necessary. He was 52 years old with no clear purpose, and a daughter who might never speak to him again, and a life that needed rebuilding from nothing. And for the first time since he was 23, that felt like exactly what he deserved. His phone buzzed as he walked. Text message from an unknown number. "Thanks for choosing me, even though I'm still mad at you, even though this doesn't fix anything. Thanks, I." Isabella, using her initial instead of signing her name. A small gesture, maybe meaningless, maybe the beginning of something. Dominic read it 3 times, saved it, put the phone in his pocket. Then he walked through the French Quarter, past the life he was leaving behind, toward whatever came next. The storm had passed. The city gleamed, washed clean, ready for tomorrow. And Dominic Salvatore, no longer a boss, no longer sure who he was, walked with it.